Archaeologists, scientists cannot explain all of what they discover when it is not possible to find accurate information about the history of the find and the nature of its origin. They put forward various assumptions if it is not possible to come to a good hypothesis. Scientists can consider the artifact found a hoax in the world. There are countless great scientific archaeological secrets. In this video, we will look at some of them. Scientists and historians have long wondered what the mysterious geographers are like in the desert of the Middle East. In April 2020, they put forward a new theory. It is believed that these lines representing themselves low stone walls, stretching for many kilometers, are ancient hunting tools. To be more precise, they are traps for animals. Our ancestors could drive animals into these places where they gathered together and were bounded by walls, which greatly facilitated their capture and killing. For the first time, geoglyphs were seen by British military pilots in the early 20th century in the deserts of Egypt and Israel, Jordan. The longest of these stone walls is located in Jordan, where they reach a length of 64 km, a sign that they can be hunting. Traps are the presence of round pea, a sign that they can be hunting. Traps are the presence. The junction of these lines, archaeologists believe that these structures were created about 2,500 years ago, were used for about 2 centuries. In fact, the walls are not like this to catch gazelles, for which apparently these stone buildings were intended. So they probably serve to redirect and distribute animals. Most modern scholars consider the manuscript to be a clever fake, but there are also those who believe that it is an authentic historical document that has not yet been translated correctly. The manuscript was discovered in Rome in 1912, and since then, its contents have remained a mystery. At some point, an expert from the University of Elsk was so convinced of its authenticity that they added its library of rare. No one knows the history of this book before 1912, but the results of carbon dating carried out on its pages suggest that it has existed since about the 15th century. The book has 240 pages, and it contains illustrations as well as text that has not yet been translated as ciphers attached to the book. But it does not work without knowing what is written in the text. It is impossible to understand the meaning of the Voynich manuscript. On some page, illustrations of plants and flowers are presented, but on the next page there may be drawings of women in 15th century clothes. There is nothing that would indicate, considering the content of the manuscript. The question arises why someone put so much effort to encode it. Perhaps it was someone's joke. Our next story is not so much about the artifacts of ancient culture as about their absence. The Sansundui culture was one of the greatest civilizations of ancient China, but about 3,000 years ago, it disappeared from history so that it did not happen to it. Theory about the disappearance of this culture: people could have been forced to relocate after a huge earthquake destroyed their territory and changed the direction of the river, depriving them of a source of water. There is some evidence that they survived the disaster and moved closer to the new river flow. This explains why in 1986 in Sichuan, far from their traditional homeland, a cluster of giant bronze sculptures was discovered that are associated with the Sansundui culture. The theory is good, but it does not explain the ultimate fate of the ancient civilization. The deliberate preservation of so many cultural products suggests an act of sacrifice or sacrifice of Denmark. Was this civilization dissolved voluntarily, after which everyone went their own deer? If yes, then why? When we find something so unique that, in our opinion, it cannot belong to the era to which it apparently belongs, we call it an inappropriate artifact. Perhaps there is no more unusual artifact in the world than they are to prey to Williams. It was found by electrical engineer John Williams in an undisclosed rural location in North America in 1998. By its shape, it resembles a plug inserted into a block of solid granite whose age is at least 100,000 years. Given Williams' profession, he was immediately accused of having created this. Object himself for the sake of deception in response. Williams stated that any scientist or researcher can come and inspect the artifact on their own, but only a few took advantage of his offer. The electric plug has no obvious signs that it was welded or glued to the stone. On the contrary, it looks like the rock itself formed around it. But given the age of the stone, this is impossible. Further complicating the situation is that at the base of the 3 pins of the plug lies unknown material. Most scientists still believe that this is not a hoax, but none of them has yet been able to prove it. We return again to the strange walls in Jordan, however. This time, scientists have no explanation for the existence of this structure. The name of this wall is Hajbib, and by right, it should be as world famous as the Great Wall of China. The dimensions of this structure are colossal. The wall stretches across the Jordanian desert for 145 km, but apparently it did not perform any function. Not an archaeologists have never been able to find a single settlement near the wall in the past or in the present, so the idea that it could have been a defensive or defensive or defensive or defensive wall disappears by itself. In 1948, a British diplomat did not notice her from the window of his plane and did not ask about her. She probably would not have attracted the attention of archaeologists. Various research excavations were carried out along the perimeter of the wall, but they did not give anything. Whoever was the creator of Hajbib, he did not leave behind a single artifact. At least not a single artifact which we managed to find at the wall undoubtedly had some purpose. We do not know what we know about it, so little that it is impossible even to say when it was built. While we are in Jordan, it is worth taking a look at the huge unexplained circles between it, Syria, and Turkey. There are more than a dozen such circles in the region, but no one knows who created them and why. For archaeologists, they are one of the largest and most conspicuous unexplained riddles in the world. Experts managed to find out that the circles are about 2,000 years old. Most of them are tall, a little over 1 meter, and composed of stones arranged in circles with an average diameter of 2 km. One of the circles is divided into 2 pam. One of the circles is divided into 2 parts by an ancient Roman road. The arrival of the Romans, it is likely that they were created by people who tied themselves with a rope at a central point and walked around it, thus giving the structure a round shape. It becomes clear why there are irregularities in the circles in those places where physical obstacles were found in the way of their creators. This theory probably explains how these circles appeared, but it does not reveal who created them and does not give any idea about why they were built. Our Neolithic ancestors may have been primitive by modern standards, but they definitely knew a lot about art. We can see this by looking at the Chinese Stone in Scotland. It is considered the greatest example of Neolithic art in the British Isles, but its purpose still remains a mystery. The Chinese Stone is a single slab about 12 meters long, the surface of which is covered with cup-shaped signs. The location of each element was chosen with precision and care, which hints at its purpose, but if it was based on some purpose, we cannot even assume in what it was. Does not help that immediately after the discovery, in 1887, the stone became a tourist attraction and the visitor was allowed to go to it. It is unknown how many possible archaeological finds were destroyed due to negligence and lack of care in 1965. The inscriptions on the slab were threatened with complete erasure. So it was decided to reburial the stone to maintain its safety, easily excavated, and they are put on public display only on special occasions, so it will help to preserve the work of art for future generations. The city of Rockwall in Texas is so named because of the ancient wall that lies beneath it. The wall that is sometimes jokingly called the Great Texas Wall was excavated in 1850, when an unknown archaeologist, Robert Hill, examined the wall in 1901. He stated that it was nothing more than a natural sandstone dam that temporarily put an end to the debate about whether the wall was built by human hands. However, Robert's assessment was erroneous because he was able to inspect only those sections of the wall that were excavated in 1901. Since then, several more parts of the wall have been excavated, and they clearly were not part of, although there are still debates on this issue. Most archaeologists agree that the Great Texas Wall is by no means of natural origin. This certainly means that it has an artificial origin, but this certainly means that it has an artificial origin. The question of who built it and why it was needed remains unresolved. We don't have a perfect method for detecting or predicting earthquakes, even with all the technologies at our disposal today. But the Chinese had it 1900 years ago. This seismograph was created by a Chinese inventor named John Hun in 132. It looks more like a vase than a scientific instrument, but it copes perfectly and continues to cope with its task. Inside a pendulum attached to the top of the seismograph is located 8 levers are connected to the pendulum, distributed evenly around the circumference under the influence of the slightest tremors. From an earthquake raging in the distance, the pendulum is deflected to the side by activating one of the levers, which in turn was attached with the other end to the dragon's head, coming out with a metal ball inside. The ball brought down the figures of toads with their mouths wide open and gave a booming, ringing. Of course, the biggest drawback of the device is that it can detect only the earthquake that has already begun. Nevertheless, it was better than that, and it would have taken more than 1,000 years before someone came up with a more effective method for detecting earthquakes. The drawing on the Sega Canyon wall in Tom Sunscrink, Utah, USA, is thousands of years old. The tarnished legacy of the mysterious ancient race of Native Americans who lived here at a time about which we know almost nothing. The drawings have been here for so long that they began to fade, as a result of which they look almost like ghostly phenomena. On the rock, it is assumed that the work was carried out by the Fremont and Utah peoples. For countless centuries, it was the Utah people who gave the name to the state of Utah. People who gave the name to the state of Utah in some works art is the key to unraveling the date of their drawings. Depict horses, which means that the images were made after 1493 in northern South America. There were no horses at all until Christopher Columbus did not bring them during his second trip to America in the same year. The art of the Utah people is the newest on the walls and the rudest. The oldest of the drawings attributed to archaic people are made in the Barrier Canyon style. Their age may be 9,000 years. The image engraved on the artifact known as the Lineabus Stone is so controversial that most historians would prefer to consider it before investigating it properly. At the time of discovery, it was broken in half, and the second piece was found sometime after the first one. Both finds were made in Bugs County, Pennsylvania in 1872. The artifact causes such controversy because it depicts a scene of Native Americans hunting a woolly mammoth. This suggests the possibility of both the existence of woolly mammoths and Native American tribes in this region. However, this is not possible since mammoths became extinct in North America at least 10,000 years ago. While a hunting tool, the carvings depicted on the carving were invented no more than 2,000 years ago. Historians claim that the scene was carved on the stone after it was split into two parts, and therefore it is not a genuine artifact. Therefore, it is not a genuine. Also say that the drawing on the two stones does not correlate perfectly, proves that the stone has already been broken. Taking into account all this, it can be assumed that Lineabus, the stone, is most likely a fake, but there is always an element of doubt. And that's it for me. If you liked this video, do not forget to rate it. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell. For me, your activity is the best reward. Thank you for your attention. See you soon for now.